Hey everyone, so my video kind of cut off last time and I was alright with that because I felt like it kind of left off at a good topic. I was going a little more in depth about homelessness and the relationship and how that correlates into mental health. And I was also getting into the topic of family courts and how severances of parental guardians may be an actual root cause to some of the mental health effects that we see in our society, such as borderline personality disorder. And I was also just getting into the topic of basically experience of children aid agencies and their relationship to the mental health, and how currently that's the number one reason that they take kids in agencies is through mental health, and how it can be so ambiguous. And unfortunately, this can now cause lots of stigmas and lots of issues for people to want to necessarily get help or to seek therapy or be in denial of having issues, because if they show any form of vulnerability, then they could be subjected to unwanted things. So I think this is an interesting topic, and I was kind of getting into how mental health needs to change and evolve, because currently it's so much so still like a business. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to just give an example, is when I first got tried into losing my kids. I had to go and see a court. I was supposed to see a court within 5 days of my kids being removed, but I didn't. The main reasons why they removed my kids initially was due to cradle cap and cleanliness. Soon the case really quickly evolved. I was not notified of any changes. They didn't give me a disclosure. They didn't give me anything that was, good for me. And basically, I didn't see a courthouse till like 20 something days after, like way beyond. Um, I was supposed to see a courthouse, and they kept on pushing on how this was very volunteer. Like I had volunteered to give my kids up, when that was not the case at all. Um, and they changed it into it being a mental health case, and the accusations that I was being accused of were extreme for the time, like not anything that I had actually done to my children. But they could obviously sense that there was some mental health challenges that I was going through, and they preyed on that. um, Needless to say, I was given like a disclosure, and I was given like basically these terms and agreements, and the terms and agreements were like terms that I had to do in order to officially get my kids back. And one of those terms and agreements was to get a psychotherapist appointment. But the term and agreement didn't say get a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, sorry. Not just psychotherapist, because that was one of the term agreements, that you had to do 12 sessions with a therapist. And then the other term and condition was that basically that they get to, you have to go get a psychiatrist appointment through this specific location. And it was like Canadian Mental Association of Health, or like it was something weird, like it was like CAMH but reverted. And so I go to look up the location of the place, and I find out that the location is directly in the children's aid office. So they want me to go get a psychiatrist appointment directly from the agency itself. And meanwhile, I'm dealing with all these claims that the child agency says that I am. And so right then and there, I realized how much so this is a business, right? And so I had to, see my lawyer and be like, this needs to be changed. I need to be able to go see a psychiatrist that I choose, from whether that be from CAMH or whether that be from St. Michael's or wherever I choose. At least I have a relationship to my medicine, not where they choose where I go. And so that's when I realized, how many mothers even fell for that ploy, right? And so that's where I say, mental health is sort of like a business, and they get money for each letter that they send, each thing that they diagnose, and it's a case files are worth money, right? And that's so unfortunate in our current society, but that's what's happening with mental health, and that is why we have this strong stigma going on. And so not just that, but I could go through all the things that the children agencies did in order to try to attack my mental health, which was real concern, right? So I can really see how it's still a business, and it's very, very unfortunate. And until that changes, then we could start to evolve on how to have our conversations about mental health and how we can be more reintegrating of families, and allow for people to actually heal, than be discriminated against for having a challenge or for having something that they may not understand quite yet. But we're at a time and age now where we have all this funding, we have all this money that can be poured into, and it is being poured into the research about mental health. And we know that it's an innate thing that every single human being needs in their lives. And it's unfortunate that we have a demographic that's still being highly, highly discriminated against and has been systematically attacked for even hundreds of years when we talk about racism politics, and when we talk about how laws and things have been shifted in order to create more oppression to certain classes of people. So to me, this is, by having this diagnosis, I was able to see how far deep the system is really, making this a business. And so that's child aid services. I actually ended up getting my kids back. I did all the therapy sessions. It was really unfortunate because once you complete all your therapy sessions, once you've done all the evaluations, and once you've gotten your diagnosis or whatever, they put you through what's called like a transitional, like housing, like rehab, like it's like a THAP program. It's not a THAP program, but it's like a program that's for reuniting the kids. So it's like one more step program. And I remember going into these sorts of units, and there was like, these are all like the cream of the crop, right? And so I remember that there was like letter A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and all the rooms went all the way to the letter R. And you had up to a 4-hour visitation with your children. And, with each room, that's like 2 families coming in per room. And so like there's like roughly like 30 families, coming through per day. And then if you break that over 5 days, you see that that's like 30 times 5, so 150 visitations going on per week. And what you notice is in their brochures, they sort of like advertise the fact that they've only, returned 400 kids over the 12 years that they've been open. And you break that down by 12 months, and you realize that, wow, you only return like 1 kid per month. And you really see the statistics of what I'm talking about when you see how these sorts of agencies and these sorts of government agencies are designed on targeting these demographics, and they get a shit ton of funding to basically not actually solve or resolve or actually help or actually go anywhere. And it's really, really sad because we inflict trauma on the masses through these sorts of agencies. And these agencies were really targeted on particularly Black families, Native families. Right now, we've been targeting Iranian families, and so it's really unfortunate, and it's something that is going on in our current society, and has been going on in our current society. So when you look at residential schools, when you look at trading schools, and I say this because I think these are also effects that can cause borderline issues in our children. And so that's another thing that I think about. So like the foster care agencies, when I think about that, when I think about group homes, when I think about residential school victims, when I think about any of that sort of stuff. So that's been my train of thought on some of this stuff, just because I come from a family line of 4 generations now involved in agencies. Now, I want to also get into the stigma that borderline has because of all this black and white thinking that we got going on with it. And we don't really want to get into the root causes of it, which is really interesting because we're like, oh, she has borderline. These are all of the negative traits and all the things that's wrong with her. But we don't really promote the fact that it is very, very treatable, and it's not treated through medications. It's treated through generally like behavioral therapy. And we don't really advertise managed borderlines in our current social medias. Even like it's always negative traits on borderlines. It's not actually advertised to show managed borderlines. And that's a concern. And why I say that's a concern? Well, I'm going to give an example. For example, borderlines feel like they can't actually tell someone when they feel sick. Because when they go to the hospital, this actually happened to me. When I went to the hospital, I was extremely sick. And the doctors were like, oh, you have borderline personality disorder. Like, it's on file that I have this diagnosis. And I'm like, yes. And they basically dismissed me and then asked me if I wanted a psychological admittance into their hospital. And I was like, no, I'm actually feeling really physically sick. I don't know what's wrong with me. I haven't been able to get out of bed. So then they gave me a note to go to a doctor. And I go to a doctor, and the doctor starts saying, oh, well, maybe you need a psychological reference, because I guess in this document that they sent to the doctor, it talked about me needing a psychological reference all of a sudden. I'm like, no, I'm really sick. I need to figure out what's going on. It wasn't until I was so sick. I was really sick. Like, I was actually blowing out snot, all this sort of stuff. And I had to call my dad, and I'm just like in tears. I'm just like, Dad, like, I keep on trying to reach out to say that I feel sick, and no one's giving me a prescription or anything to deal with the sickness because they all want to psychologically evaluate me all of a sudden. And so he had to take me out, drive me all the way out of town, just for me to go to a hospital and them say, yes, you are sick. You have an infection. You have strep throat here, blah, 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 blah. They gave me the antibiotics and I was completely fine. But these are the stigmas that borderlines deal with. They don't have the same advertisement for managed borderlines. So when you hear, oh, she has borderline, you just think the worst of the worst. And we deal with the stigmas of the worst because of it. And it's kind of sad and unfortunate because I'm like, yes, there was a point in my time where I was severe, but now I'm very managed and I still get the same stigma sort of responses when I go to talk about my disorders experience. So these are the things that come to mind. And I do have to say that when I talk about physical health, this is another interesting topic because I actually went through many different physical challenges as well by having borderline personality disorder. So the first physical challenge that I really had was had to do with breathing. So I would go into hyperventilation when I was very, very young. And I would breathe with my mouth open. And I would commonly have throat, sinus, and chest infections. It was I was chronically diagnosed with having pneumonia quite a few times. And I remember, even going to sick kid hospitals and being hooked up to ventilators just for breathing necessarily. And I remember my immune system being super, super low and having issues with my B12 levels and with my iron levels as well. I think that had to do with the fact that when I was a kid, my mom did prescribe me on a lot of medications. What that meant is that she often thought I was sick, and I was sick. But I think I was also given a lot of prescriptions from the doctors. And I had to spend quite a few amount of years kind of getting my immune system back, doing some herbology stuff and getting into supplements and taking supplements for my body a little bit more. That's been a whole journey and a whole process. I even had to, for myself, I did work on breath work, and doing a lot of studying into breath work and spending hours before bed just trying to practice some breath work stuff. And I also did sound therapy stuff, which was putting hertz and frequencies in. I found that I had a major problem with nervous system. So with the nervous system, that meant that I would have these sorts of explosion sort of sensories going on in my brain, really hypersensitive, fluctuations of up and down. I'm also ADHD, so I'm high functioning, so it does feel like I'm pretty, my nervous system's pretty go go go. And I think that's partly why I was drawn to taking substances, because they were able to calm my nerves down in certain ways. And that's an interesting relationship because, again, I was using it as a masking rather than necessarily for anything else. It was more of this helps me feel more calm. This helps me feel more organized. This helps me express my emotions. I was using it as more of a band-aid to symptoms that I didn't quite understand yet, but I'm more understanding now that I've done the therapy to be able to discuss all these sorts of layers and where it comes from. Though, essentially, with my nervous system, that meant that my cortisol levels were more heightened. And what that means is that I had a lot of skin problems. So flare-outs with eczema. I might even have a little bit of it going on right now. So you can see sort of those flare-outs that occur. And the eczema, those eczemas are very, very common for people who have higher cortisol levels, and cortisol levels is stress. So it's important that people who suffer with borderline is that we have time to actually like decompress, have some deep breathing, have a hot bath, have a tea, do the things that you like to do, get comfortable in being alone, get comfortable and maybe like writing some music or being creative or somehow releasing those cortisol levels and calming our nervous system down, because when we're in these sorts of response triggers, which are like a traumatic sort of event to us, we are releasing those sorts of receptors all the time. It's like we're releasing that cortisol at a higher level, and then these things can get tied to, like, again, these things can get tied to like liver issues, thyroid issues, and other issues in our bodies. And this is why it's important to get diagnosed with it and understand the complexities of it and understand where you're physically getting affected as well. Because I had to do blood tests and realize that, I am not taking enough iron. I needed more B12. My cortisol levels are super high, so I need to like relax more. I need to force myself to sometimes take a chill, have a nap. I need to force myself to have a bath. Those sorts of things, because it helps to calm me down, essentially. And the medications, like the stimulant medications that they were prescribing me on for ADHD, this was even before I had a psychiatrist's evaluation. They knew that the doctors basically assumed that I was ADHD based off the symptoms that I was experiencing, was already prescribing me on ADHD medications a couple of years before I was prescribed with a psychiatrist. And like I couldn't take Adderall, because Adderall would just put me to sleep. And anybody who knows, that would keep anyone wide awake. But that's just to show that my brain is naturally so up that this is the stuff that calms me down, right? And so they would prescribe me Ritalin instead. So as you can tell, like other stimulants, I was attracted to things like MDMA or things like cocaine, because this stimulant reaction was calming me down. It was doing the opposite effect. It wasn't actually like bringing me up. It was bringing me down. I could think straight. I could organize things. And the ADHD medication did make me think straight, did make me organize things. But then there came a point where my tolerance was super high. And my tolerance was continuing to go up, not down. And unfortunately, my prescribed medication was like so high that the doctors were like, had to sit me down and say, hey, listen, if you don't stop this, you're going to have a heart attack by the time you're 35. And that was a big like wake up call for me, because I realized that, okay, like even with this medication, yeah, it's helping me, but really for how long? Again, this is a Band-Aid. This is a substance. This is a Band-Aid that's only going to help you for so long until it doesn't, and ultimately kill you in the end. And that's the reality with even like substance abuse issues, is that ultimately you're risking ODing or having an accidental overdose, or it can ultimately kill you in the end. So it's not the ultimate choice, but I'm just trying to explain why people with mental health disorders may be drawn to it, is because they're trying to mask these symptoms that they have yet to understand. Or they literally have the chemistry where they're getting a real benefit from these things, like how they say ADHD has a benefit to tobacco. You smoke cigarettes. I still smoke cigarettes. I find it calms me down. I can still focus. Do I know that's going to kill me in the end? Yeah. So I should try to work on quitting. And I am. I know that, right? But then they do this experiment and they say, oh, wow, people with ADHD are having this huge benefit with tobacco, and that maybe we should be designing these prescriptions that have sort of this nicotine receptor that helps ADHD people focus. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So we have naturally these receptors that make us more, it makes us more attracted or wanting this chemical benefit, right? So it's the same idea with people who are ADHD might be very attracted to doing meth or cocaine because they're actually receiving a physical benefit from it. Or how, they might have a problem with their medications or very, very high tolerance. But again, they might be receiving benefit from it, but for how long, right? We all know that ultimately in the end, eventually this stuff is going to kill us. And that's essentially what my medication started to do. It started attacking my immune system very, very hard. I was getting sick very, very often. And it took me like about 1.5 years just to recover from taking that medication because of the physical health effects it started to actually give me. And in order to get off of it, I actually had to do a lot of CBD treatments for anxiety and for stress. And I do smoke weed to like calm my brain down. Though it's not like I'm prescribed on all these like apomethylphenidate, which is like synthetic meth essentially, or any of these sorts of compounds that are going to be attacking my immune system, that are going to cause me long-term health effects in my future. So I don't have a bad relation with chemicals the same way, but it was a whole process. A lot of that codependency issues had to do with getting a benefit and having it mask my symptoms. Like for the ADHD component, feeling like I could organize or clean or sort a lot better. For the BBD component, it was for my emotions, to feel like my emotions were validated and that I was getting it out or numbing them down. So that's kind of the relation. I think a huge eye-opener for me was I did a lot of like harm reduction, support work and volunteering. I was on the front lines. I had a lot of awareness in exchanges of story and of people's backgrounds and people's challenges and people's relation to mental health. That I started to realize that there's more to this. And, even some of the greatest minds and greatest innovators and neurodivergent people end up using, and we see that in our media, and we see that in, obviously, like, even in the psychiatry textbooks, like some of these authors were regularly using meth and using cocaine and prescribing meth and prescribing cocaine. And, some of our, biggest musicians and scientists and all these sorts of ideas had mental health disorders and had these drug substance abuse relations. It's not like it should not be a taboo thing that people are so like down and stigmatized on. I think we have to really understand that this is a common thing that humans tend to delve into or dive into through trying to understand our minds and our psyches. And I think that this is something that's commonly tabooed on, even though, you know, the statistics says that there's a large percentage of people that are currently having some sort of substance relation, whether that be tobacco, whether that be alcohol, whether that be sex, whether that be the list goes on. And so it's an interesting conversation, just in general, when we talk about substance abuse relation and disorder. Anyways, I'm gonna take a break for now. I'll probably get into a little bit more detail about substance relation stuff, because I still feel like I have more to talk about on that. But I'm gonna end the video. I'm just kind of been pacing around talking about these sorts of ideas that have been going on in my head, and, you know, by living through borderline and my journey through borderline, all the experiences and the thought processes that have gone on in my head, and what it means to be a managed BPD, and what it means to keep working on yourself. So here I am, and I hope that today's video kind of invokes some thought processes. And I'll just keep on talking about my journey through BPD and some of the thought processes and experiences, and basically what I'm learning from all this is about. All right, bye.